No knowledge is the awakened state. Now, what's meant by that is, there's a statement where people kind of mistranslated the idea that, the sage wants to keep people in a state of ignorance. No, that keeping people ignorant is not the idea. What the term is actually no knowledge. It is the not knowing, the ending of sitting in meditation, relying on knowledge. If you really think about it, the whole idea of becoming one pointed, to have one pointed concentration, there's no knowledge in that. Now, having all sorts of random extraneous thoughts, yeah, you could say there's knowledge being perused in that, but not in one pointed concentration. Yes, knowledge is useful, or as Master Liang would always quote, knowledge is unlimited and life is limited. Therefore, we want to really pursue the idea of health and longevity. But knowledge itself can't do that for you. It's only within no knowledge, in this one pointed concentration, in this mindfulness, etc., that all that awareness, where we are limiting our thoughts down to one single point. The power that comes with no knowledge is far greater than the power that comes with knowledge.
And then Craig asked, I was wondering if you might be able to share a little bit how you approach learning and knowing. How do you differentiate between insight that moves you forward on the spiral and knowledge that creates perplexities?
First of all, all knowledge is good. Lao Zi's never anybody saying that it's not good. It's just that it is, let's just put it this way. Knowledge is, you'll never know everything, ever. It's impossible for a singular human being to know everything. And I don't even think Buddha knew everything, if you get down to it. But this idea of this meaning of knowledge is that, we're all creatures of learning. Everything from learning not to put our fingers into the fire, that's knowledge. Then, going on to getting, as TT would call it, PhD of PhDs, that's knowledge too. And there's things that we learn through experiment, through experience. And then there's knowledge that we go after of our own accord. In Buddhism, they call this prajna knowledge, meaning wisdom of spiritual things, I guess, basically, is the way to put it. And we're all in this process of getting knowledge. That's what this class is about. I learn as much as you do when we do these things, mostly from your questions. But knowledge can also cause us a great deal of trouble. And, as, we can look at it from the standpoint, was it good knowledge to learn how to make the atom bomb? Probably not. Maybe on some levels, etc. Maybe in the future it's going to be a great thing. We don't know. All we know is that knowledge created some problems, just like the knowledge we got in creating weapons. All the metal and machinery we use for war, that was gained knowledge. Is it the best? Probably not. Then there's knowledge about helping people, like the knowledge of how to cure diseases. I mean, I in Phoenix here, when I drive to the airport and stuff, I pass the children's hospital. and the knowledge that it needs to run that place and make kids healthy. That's great knowledge. We need that knowledge to end suffering. So, but I can talk about it all on that level, and we all can discern maybe what is good knowledge and what is unuseful knowledge. But no knowledge, kind of the anti-thing of that, is where we find our awakenings, where we find our illumination, our spiritual advancements, etc. All these spiritual penetrations, as people like to call it. That all happens within no knowledge. So to sit, let's just take it as that example. To sit and just be of no knowledge is incredible. And I'm going to tell you a little, this may seem awkward at first, but I just had this discussion with a couple of my students about my grandparents on my father's side. They came from Norway and they had a farm and they were organic before anybody even said the word. I mean, they just grew their own food and their lifestyle was just their house. Everything was like Norway. It was beautiful. But I always noticed that when I'd have to, during the summer times, I'd go up north and spend summers with my grandparents. They had a bench that sat right in front of their little garden. I remember talking to my grandpa once because I would see them every afternoon. They'd go out and they'd sit on this bench. They'd sit together and they'd stare at their garden. They never talked. They would just sit there. And then they would get up and go about their activities after a while. And I asked my grandfather, what do you and grandma do when you sit on that bench? And he looked at me and he smiled and he goes, I listen to the bees. And I go, the bees? And sure enough, I never realized it, but they had built this little beehive far end of the garden. And he could tell from the sound of the bees what was going to go on with weather. And I mean, this is just stuff that was beyond me. I didn't know. But he looked at me one time and he just said, it's really good to be quiet. He said, you learn a lot being quiet. And there's been things in my life that have connected me to that statement because he was gaining knowledge without the attempt of gaining knowledge. He just sat. It was so peaceful, so quiet. It wasn't like somebody trying to study something or learn or experiment. It was just pure quietness. And he would learn a great deal in that solitude. And I've brought this up before, like two things. They were useful, and I just look at this, from what Lao Zi is trying to tell us here about knowledge. Yeah, there's a lot of things to learn, and we're all in the process of it. But how we approach that is going to be the deciding factor in our quality of life. Because we are all geared to think that the only way we're going to learn things, is through this study, through this experience, et cetera, et cetera. But yet, we have the greatest, spiritual figures in our life who did not go that route. Buddha didn't go to school. Lao Zi didn't go to school, and take that route. They took the route of, let's just say, tranquility in order to gain clarity. So we can also look at this from another viewpoint. How on earth did the Chinese and other cultures, in a time when they had no technology to do this, understand the human body so well, to understand its functions? And it was done through insight and intuition, this concentration. There was no school to go to. There were no books to study. There were no doctors to go to as such. And that's true of all spiritual practices too. You can sit here and say, oh, you could go study all the Buddha sutras, but those didn't exist during Buddha's time. They didn't exist for about 300 years later. So we're those generations before. So anyway, this is a really difficult question. It's just difficult to know, but I think we can all discern what is this kind of knowledge that we have to be aggressive about to get. And then that type of knowledge that is done through non-aggression, through just being quiet. So that's as much as I know about